I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to cross a line like this. But the truth is, we never really know ourselves until we're tested. Until life puts us in a moment where everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about right and wrong, just slips through our fingers. I'm not asking for sympathy. I know what I did. I live with it every single day. But the thing about mistakes? They don't always come screaming at you. They don't show up with big flashing lights saying, "Hey, this is the moment your life is about to change forever." No. Mistakes, they creep in slowly, softly. They start as something small, something you tell yourself doesn't mean anything. Just a harmless thought. Just a look that lingers. Just a moment that holds on a little too long. I used to be the kind of woman who judged people. I really did. I'd hear stories, whispers about other women, about wives who strayed, about women who should have known better, and I'd think, God, how could they do that? How could you ever let yourself end up in a place like that? And then, one day, I woke up and I was them. I need to tell you this story. I need to get it out. But before I do, I have to warn you, this is not an easy story to hear. If you've ever been in a complicated situation, if you've ever felt like the ground beneath you is shifting and you couldn't stop it, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. And if you don't? If you think I'm a terrible person by the end of this, I won't argue. I won't defend myself. But I just need to know, if you were in my place, what would you have done? If you've ever been in a complicated situation, if you've ever had a secret you couldn't tell anyone, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking infidelity sagas. Because trust me, this story is just beginning. I don't know when it started. Not really. You'd think a moment like this would have a clear beginning, a point in time you could pinpoint and say, that's when everything changed. But it wasn't like that. It was slow, like a whisper in the background of my life, getting louder and louder until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was 38, married for over a decade, to a man who used to make me feel like the center of his world, but had, somewhere along the way, let me drift to the edges. I don't even remember the last time he really looked at me. The last time he noticed the way I did my hair or the perfume I wore. It was like I had become furniture in my own home there, useful, but unseen. He worked late. He was always too tired, too stressed, too distracted. And when he was home, he was glued to his phone or sitting in front of the TV, barely acknowledging me. I stopped trying after a while. Stopped dressing up for him. Stopped asking if he'd be home for dinner. Stopped hoping he'd reach for me at night. That kind of silence? It does something to a person. It makes you start to feel like you don't exist. Like you're fading, piece by piece, and no one even notices. But someone did notice. My stepson was 18. Just on the cusp of adulthood, but still living under our roof. He had always been quiet, always kept to himself. But something had shifted in the last year. He had grown taller, broader. His voice had deepened, his presence had changed. There was a confidence in him now, a way he moved through the house like he belonged in it, like he was becoming something more than just the kid who lived in our spare bedroom. And he was observant. More than I ever realized. I think that's what caught me off guard the most. The way he saw me. The way he would notice the things my husband never did. If I changed my hair, he'd mention it. If I was quiet, he'd ask if I was okay. If I sighed at the dinner table, overwhelmed and tired, he'd glance at me in a way that felt like understanding. And God, I needed that. I needed to feel like someone saw me. Like I was real again. The house we lived in was beautiful, but cold. A suburban home, just outside the city, with perfect landscaping and pristine walls. The kind of place that should have felt safe, warm, but to me, it felt like a prison. The walls were thick, the rooms too quiet, the air always heavy with words left unsaid. I spent most nights alone, curled up on the couch, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards. My husband was never home before midnight. And when he was, he barely spoke to me. Loneliness is a strange thing. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, like a slow leak, until one day you realize you're drowning. and you don't even know how it happened. I wish I could say I never saw it coming. I wish I could say I wasn't aware of the way things were shifting. But the truth is, I felt it. I felt the air change between us. The way our conversations grew longer, the way his eyes lingered on me just a little too long. And I didn't stop it. Because for the first time in years, I felt something. And that feeling? It was intoxicating. It happened on a weekend like any other. My husband had promised we'd go together. He said he needed a break, that we should spend some time as a family. But when the time came, he was too busy again. Another project, another late-night call, another excuse that barely even sounded convincing anymore. I didn't argue. I was too tired to fight for his time. So it was just me and him. My stepson. The beach was quieter than I expected. The sun was warm but not harsh, the waves gentle. It should have felt peaceful. It should have been just another day. But something felt different. I could feel it before I understood it. The way the wind felt heavier on my skin, the way the air between us carried something unspoken. I should have known then. I should have turned back before the moment found us. I waded into the water first, feeling the coolness rush up my legs, washing over my skin like a reset. He was behind me, his footsteps barely audible over the sound of the waves. And then I slipped. It happened so fast. 1 second, I was steady. The next, the sand shifted beneath my feet, and I was falling. And then, his hands, gripping my waist, holding me up. Solid, warm, close. We laughed. At first, that's all it was. Just laughter. Just a harmless moment. But when I turned to look at him, when our eyes met, the laughter faded too fast. The moment stretched too long. His hands didn't move right away. And something about the way he was holding me, it wasn't the way a son holds a mother. It wasn't the way family should touch. I stepped back first, shaking off the moment like it never happened. Like I hadn't felt what I felt. Like I hadn't noticed the way his grip had lingered. We didn't speak of it. We didn't have to. The silence carried more weight than words ever could. Later, as we sat on the sand, drying off, I caught him watching me. Not just watching. His gaze was different. Studying. Thinking. And for the first time, I let myself wonder what exactly he was thinking about. I should have been afraid. I should have shut it down right then and there. But the truth? The truth is that I didn't want to. I wanted to hold on to that feeling, that moment where, for the first time in years, someone's touch made me feel something. Even if it was wrong. I told myself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just a trick of the mind, of the body, of loneliness pressing in too hard. But no matter how many times I repeated that to myself, I couldn't shake it. The way his hands had felt on my waist. The way his eyes had held mine a second too long. The way, for a breath, I had forgotten to pull away. I scolded myself. Hard. What kind of woman even thinks like this? What kind of person takes a harmless accident and turns it into something else? I told myself I was reading into things that weren't there. That I was just desperate for attention, so desperate that my mind was twisting a meaningless moment into something dangerous. Something that shouldn't even be a thought, let alone a feeling. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew what I had felt. And I knew that, for just a second, I hadn't wanted him to let go. I tried to push it away. To pretend I wasn't hyper-aware of his presence when we got back home. But suddenly, everything felt different. The way he moved through the house. The way his voice sounded when he spoke to me. The way my skin prickled when he was near. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself for wondering if he noticed too. And then the guilt came. Fast. Heavy. Crushing. What was wrong with me? How could I even entertain something so wrong, so impossible? He wasn't just any man. He wasn't some stranger. He was my stepson. A boy I had helped raise. A boy I had watched grow up, taught, guided. How could my mind betray me like this? How could my body betray me like this? I started watching myself, overcorrecting. Pulling away faster when he walked too close. Making sure my voice was steady, detached. Keeping my distance, creating space. But none of it mattered. Because the more I tried to ignore it, the more I felt it. The more I saw it. The way he looked at me now. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't just casual glances. There was something else there. Something careful. Something knowing. I told myself it was in my head. That I was just imagining it. That I was so starved for affection, for attention, that I was twisting things that weren't real. But if that was true, then why did his eyes linger? Why did I feel his presence before I even saw him? Why did I catch him watching me, like he was waiting for something? I should have put an end to it. Right then. Right there. I should have drawn a hard, clear line between us. But the truth is, I didn't want to. Something had shifted. I wasn't imagining it anymore. It was real. I could feel it in the air between us, thick like a storm waiting to break. It was in the way he moved, closer than before, always just near enough that I noticed. He used to be distant, keeping to himself, lost in his own world. But now he found reasons to linger. If I was in the kitchen, he was suddenly there too, reaching for a glass just as I turned, standing too close, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him at my back. If I sat on the couch, he'd choose the chair nearest to me, angling his body toward mine, his attention fixed on something, anything, that kept him in my orbit. It was subtle. Never too much. Never enough to say anything out loud. But I felt it. And I hated that I didn't mind. The first time he touched me, really touched me, it was nothing. Just a passing moment. A brush of his fingers against my shoulder as he walked by. But it lingered. Just enough. Just long enough for my breath to catch, for my skin to tingle, for me to wonder if he had meant to do it. And then it happened again. And again. Always small. Always casual. A hand at the small of my back as he reached for something. His knee grazing mine under the table. His fingers curling briefly around my wrist when he passed me something. Too brief to call out, too natural to accuse. But each time, my body reacted before my mind could stop it. And I hated myself for it. Then came the night in the kitchen. I couldn't sleep. I don't know why. Maybe I was already restless from everything I had been pushing down, from every feeling I had been trying to smother. I found myself in the kitchen, standing in the dim glow of the refrigerator light, sipping water, trying to quiet the thoughts in my head. And then I felt it before I even saw him. He was there, standing in the doorway, watching me. I turned, and our eyes met. And for the first time, I didn't look away. I couldn't look away. We didn't speak. The silence stretched between us, thick, charged, heavy with something unspoken. I should have said something. I should have broken whatever was happening between us. But I didn't. And neither did he. We just stood there, staring, breathing, waiting for something neither of us would say out loud. I don't know how long it lasted. A second? A minute? An eternity? All I know is that it ended when I forced myself to move. To break the moment before it became something I couldn't undo. I turned my back, gripping the edge of the counter, grounding myself. And when I finally turned around again, he was gone. But that night changed everything. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. That I was making something out of nothing. That I was the only one feeling this pull. But I wasn't. Because the next day, he touched me again. And this time, I knew it wasn't accidental. I knew. And I let it happen. It was bound to happen. I see that now. Every small moment, every lingering glance, every accidental touch had been pulling us towards something neither of us had the strength to stop. And that night, that stormy night, it finally happened. The rain had been falling hard all evening. Thick sheets slamming against the windows, the wind howling through the trees. The kind of storm that makes the world feel smaller, makes the air inside the house heavier, like something is pressing down on you, like the walls are closing in. My husband was away, out of town for work. It was just the two of us. I don't even remember how the conversation started. Something simple. Something harmless. But then, it changed. The way conversations between us had been changing lately. Slipping past the edges of what was safe, dipping into something deeper, something we weren't supposed to touch. We were sitting across from each other in the living room, the only light coming from the flickering glow of a candle on the coffee table, shadows dancing across his face. And then he said something I wasn't ready for. "You're not happy." I opened my mouth to deny it, to laugh it off, to say something dismissive. But I couldn't, because it was true. And we both knew it. "He doesn't see you." My throat tightened. My chest ached. And the worst part? I wanted to hear those words. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that someone, anyone, could see the version of me I was slowly losing, piece by piece. I should have ended it right there. I should have gotten up, left the room, done anything but let the moment stretch into something irreversible. But I didn't move. Because the way he was looking at me, it wasn't a boy looking at his stepmother. It wasn't even a man looking at a woman. It was something else. Something deeper. Like he cherished me. Like I was something delicate, something precious. Like I was wanted. I can't tell you who moved first. I don't know if it was me or him, or if it was both of us at the same time, pulled by something that had been waiting to break free for too long. All I know is that 1 second there was space between us, and the next, there wasn't. His hand brushed against mine, slow, hesitant, waiting for permission I never should have given. But I didn't pull away. My breath caught. My pulse pounded so loudly I could hear it. His fingers traced over my wrist, then up my arm, his touch light, deliberate, like he was afraid I might disappear if he moved too fast. Tell me to stop. I should have. I should have said it. But I couldn't. I didn't want him to. And then, the line was crossed. It happened in a blur, and yet I felt every single second. The warmth of his breath against my skin. The way my body responded before my mind could catch up. The way his arms pulled me close, strong, certain, as if this was inevitable, as if we had both known all along that it would come to this. It was reckless. It was wrong. But in that moment, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something we had been aching for, something we had been denied for too long. And then, it was over. The silence after was unbearable. The weight of what we had just done settled in thick and suffocating. Reality hit like a tidal wave, crashing down so violently I could barely breathe. I pulled away first, my hands shaking, my mind scrambling for an explanation, for a way to undo something that could never be undone. He looked at me, eyes searching, waiting for me to say something, to tell him what this meant, to tell him what we were supposed to do next. But I had no answers. Only regret, raw and immediate, crawling up my throat like poison. I whispered his name. Not in longing. Not in affection. But in horror. In disbelief at myself. And then I did the only thing I could think to do. I ran. The morning after felt unreal. Like waking up from a dream so vivid that, for a moment, you forget what's real and what isn't. But then the weight of it came crashing down, heavy, suffocating, unrelenting. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I had done something I could never take back. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that moment, his hands on me, my breath tangled with his, the way my body had betrayed every rational thought in my head. And then, the moment after. The sickening crash of reality, the sharp pang of guilt ripping through my chest. I kept waiting for it to feel like someone else's life, someone else's mistake. But it wasn't. It was mine. I stayed in my room longer than usual, afraid to step out, afraid to face him, afraid of what I'd see in his eyes. Would it be regret? Would it be anger? Would he look at me like I had ruined him? Or worse, would he look at me like he didn't regret it at all? When I finally left my room, the house was too quiet. It wasn't empty, I knew that. He was here. Somewhere. But it felt different now. The air was thick, tense, charged with something unspeakable. It was as if the walls themselves knew what I had done. I felt them closing in on me, pressing against my skin, whispering my sins back at me. I heard him before I saw him. The clink of a spoon against a bowl, the slow scrape of a chair being pulled back. I forced myself to step forward, to enter the kitchen like it was just another morning. Like my entire world hadn't tilted off its axis the night before. He was sitting at the table, eating, staring at his cereal like it held the answers to something only he understood. He didn't look up when I walked in. He didn't say a word. And that silence? That was worse than anything I had imagined. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, waiting for him to do something, to say something, to give me any indication of what was running through his head. But he didn't. And I didn't either. Because what was there to say? Good morning? How did you sleep? Let's pretend last night never happened. I poured myself coffee with shaking hands, my mind racing. Was he regretting it? Did he hate me for what happened? Was he going to tell someone? Was this the moment my entire life unraveled? My husband. He had no idea. He was still oblivious, still stuck in his routine, still moving through life as if nothing had changed. Because for him, nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek that morning, the same way he always did, absent-mindedly, barely even touching me before heading out the door. And for the first time, I flinched. He didn't notice. He never noticed anything anymore. And that should have made me feel relieved. But it didn't. It made me feel sick. Because what kind of person does something like this? What kind of woman betrays her marriage, crosses a line so deep, and then stands in her kitchen making coffee like nothing happened? The day crawled by in a haze. I avoided him. He avoided me. We moved around each other like strangers in the same house. Everything looked the same. The furniture, the walls, the photos on the mantle. But nothing felt the same. Because nothing was. Every stolen glance sent my heart racing. Every shift in his posture made my breath hitch. I kept waiting for him to pull me aside, to say something, to demand something from me. But he never did. And that silence? That was the worst part. Because it meant he was thinking. And I didn't know what he was thinking. Was he regretting it? Did he feel disgusted by me? By himself? Or was he waiting? Waiting for me to admit something, to acknowledge something, to do something. And then the paranoia set in. Was he going to tell someone? Would he let it slip? Would he get angry one day, lash out, use it against me? Would he ruin me? Would I deserve it if he did? I felt like I was unraveling. Like my own skin was too tight, my own body foreign to me. I wanted to rewind time. I wanted to erase it. I wanted to wake up and find that none of it had ever happened. But I couldn't, because it had happened. And the worst part? A part of me didn't want to erase it. I never thought I'd be this person. I never thought I'd be standing in front of a mirror, staring at my own reflection, and not recognizing the woman looking back at me. But there I was. And I hated her. I hated every inch of her. I hated the way she had let herself be seen. The way she had let herself feel. The way she had let something happen that should have never happened. But most of all, I hated that there was a part of her that didn't regret it. A part of her that still ached to feel wanted again. Because the truth is, for one fleeting moment, I did feel wanted. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. And that feeling? That warmth, that hunger, that attention, it had filled something in me. Something empty. Something hollow. And no matter how much I told myself it was wrong, no matter how much I tried to smother it beneath shame and self-loathing, it was still there. Haunting me. Tempting me. What happens now? That question rattled inside my skull like a ghost I couldn't get rid of. Do I confess? Do I say the words out loud, let them poison the air, destroy everything in their path? Do I tell my husband? Do I tell myself this was a mistake and pretend it never happened? Do I bury it deep, lock it away, pretend that for one night I wasn't me? That I was someone else? Someone reckless. Someone selfish. Someone broken. But the worst part wasn't even the guilt. It wasn't the fear of being caught or the shame curling in my stomach like a sickness that wouldn't pass. The worst part was that I didn't know if I wanted to bury it. Because part of me wanted to go back. Part of me wanted to see if he was still looking at me the same way. If he was still thinking about it. If it had shaken him the way it had shaken me. And that made me sick. This wasn't a love story. This wasn't passion. This wasn't some grand, romantic tragedy. No, this was loneliness. This was neglect. This was the slow unraveling of a woman who had spent years being invisible, only to find herself in the most dangerous way possible. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't looking for something real. I was looking for proof that I was still someone. That I was still alive. But at what cost? Because now I had a secret. And secrets don't just sit quietly in the dark. They grow. They fester. They take root inside you and refuse to let go. And I knew that no matter how much I tried to move forward, to act normal, to erase that night from my mind, it would never really leave me. I had shattered something inside myself. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted to put it back together. So tell me, what would you do? Would you tell the truth? Would you sit across from the person you vowed to love, to be faithful to, and let the words spill out like venom? Would you watch their face twist with disbelief, with anger, with heartbreak? Would you destroy them? Destroy yourself? Destroy everything? Or would you bury it? Would you lock it so deep inside you that even you start to wonder if it ever really happened? Would you wake up every morning, carry on with your life, smile when you need to, laugh when expected, and pretend that you aren't rotting from the inside out? Because that's what this is now. A choice. A fork in the road. Confession or silence. I still don't know which one is worse. People always say they know what they would do in a situation like this. That they'd be strong. That they'd do the right thing. That they'd never let something like this happen to them. But I wonder, do they really know? Because I thought I knew myself. I thought I was a good person. A loyal wife. A woman with boundaries so firm they could never crack. But loneliness, it does something to you. It twists things. It breaks things. It makes you see the world differently. It makes you do things you swore you never would. And the scariest part? Once you cross a line, you realize just how easy it is to do it again. So, tell me, would you tell the truth? Would you take the secret to your grave? Or would you find yourself, years from now, standing in front of a mirror, staring into the eyes of someone you no longer recognize, wondering how you became this person? Because if I could go back, if I could stop myself from ever feeling that first spark, that first lingering glance, that first moment where the world tilted just enough to make me question everything, would I? I want to say yes. I want to say I would have never let this happen. That I would have shut it down before it even had the chance to breathe. But the truth? I don't know. I don't know if I'd stop it. Because for one night, one reckless, fleeting, intoxicating night, I felt alive again. And that feeling? It's the most dangerous thing of all. Loneliness can push you to places you never thought you'd go. Don't let yourself get lost like I did. If this story made you feel something, if it made you question, if it made you wonder, if it made you see, then let me know in the comments. What would you have done? And if you want more stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature, subscribe. Because trust me, there's always more.